Greenwich Mean Time is the mean solar time at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London. GMT was formerly used as the International Civil Time Standard, now superseded in that function by Coordinated Universal Time. Today GMT is considered equivalent to UTC for UK civil purposes and for navigation is considered equivalent to UT1. These two meanings can differ by up to 0.9 s. Consequently, the term GMT should not be used for precise purposes. Because of Earth's uneven speed in its elliptical orbit and its axial tilt, noon GMT is rarely the exact moment the Sun crosses the Greenwich meridian and reaches its highest point in the sky there. This event may occur up to 16 minutes before or after noon GMT, a discrepancy calculated by the equation of time. Noon GMT is the annual average moment of this event, which accounts for the word mean in Greenwich Mean Time. Originally, astronomers considered a GMT day to start at noon, while for almost everyone else it started at midnight. To avoid confusion, the name Universal Time was introduced to denote GMT is counted from midnight. Astronomers preferred the old convention to simplify their observational data, so that each night was logged under a single calendar date. Today Universal Time usually refers to UTC or UT1. The term GMT is especially used by bodies connected with the United Kingdom, such as the BBC World Service, the Royal Navy, the Met Office and others, particularly in Arab countries, such as the Middle East Broadcasting Centre and OSN. It is a term commonly used in the United Kingdom and countries of the Commonwealth, including Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, Pakistan and Malaysia, and in many other countries of the Eastern Hemisphere. In some countries Greenwich Mean Time is the legal time in the winter and the population uses the term. For an explanation of why this is, see GMT in legislation, below. History. As the United Kingdom grew into an advanced maritime nation, British mariners kept at least one chronometer on GMT to calculate their longitude from the Greenwich meridian, which was by convention considered to have longitude 0 degrees, internationally adopted in the International Meridian Conference of 1884. Synchronization of the chronometer on GMT did not affect shipboard time, which was still solar time, but this practice, combined with mariners from other nations drawing from Neville Maskelyne's method of lunar distances based on observations at Greenwich, led to GMT being used worldwide as a standard time independent of location. Most time zones were based upon GMT, as an offset of a number of hours ahead of GMT, or behind GMT. Greenwich Mean Time was adopted across the island of Great Britain by the Railway Clearing House in 1847, and by almost all railway companies by the following year, from which the term railway time is derived. It was gradually adopted for other purposes, but a legal case in 1858 held local mean time to be the official time. On 14 May 1880, a letter signed by Clark to justices appeared in The Times, stating that Greenwich time is now kept almost throughout England, but it appears that Greenwich time is not legal time. For example, our polling booths were opened, say, at 8:13 and closed at 4:13 p.m. This was changed later in 1880, when Greenwich Mean Time was legally adopted throughout the island of Great Britain. GMT was adopted on the Isle of Man in 1883, Jersey in 1898 and Guernsey in 1913. Ireland adopted GMT in 1916, supplanting Dublin Mean Time. Hourly time signals from Greenwich Observatory were first broadcast on 5 February 1924, rendering the time ball at the observatory redundant in the process. The daily rotation of the Earth is somewhat irregular and is slowing down slightly. Atomic clocks constitute a much more stable time base. On 1 January 1972, GMT was superseded as the International Civil Time Standard by Coordinated Universal Time, maintained by an ensemble of atomic clocks around the world. Universal time, a term introduced in 1928, represents mean time at Greenwich determined in the traditional way to accord with the originally defined Universal Day. From 1 January 1956, this raw form of it was relabeled as UT0 and effectively superseded by refined forms UT1 and UT2. Indeed, even the Greenwich meridian itself is not quite what it used to be, defined by the center of the transit instrument at the observatory at Greenwich. Although that instrument still survives in working order, it is no longer in use, and now the meridian of origin of the world's longitude and time is not strictly defined in material form but from a statistical solution resulting from observations of all time determination stations which the BIPM takes into account when coordinating the world's time signals. Nevertheless, the line in the old observatory's courtyard today differs no more than a few meters from that imaginary line which is now the prime meridian of the world. House, Greenwich time and the longitude. London. Philip Wilson. Ambiguity in the definition of GMT. Historically, GMT has been used with two different conventions for numbering hours. The long-standing astronomical convention dating from the work of Ptolemy was to refer to noon as 0 hours. This contrasted with the civil convention of referring to midnight as 0 hours dating from the Romans. The latter convention was adopted on and after 1 January 1925 for astronomical purposes, resulting in a discontinuity of 12 hours, or half a day earlier. The instant that was designated December 31.5 GMT in 1924 almanacs became January 1.0 GMT in 1925 almanacs. The term Greenwich Mean Astronomical Time was introduced to unambiguously refer to the previous noon-based astronomical convention for GMT. The more specific terms UT and UTC do not share this ambiguity, always referring to midnight as 0 hours. GMT in legislation. United Kingdom legally, the civil time used in Britain is called still Greenwich Mean Time, according to the Interpretation Act 1978, with an exception made for those periods when the Summer Time Act 1972 orders an hour's shift for daylight saving. The Interpretation Act 1978, Section 9, provides that whenever an expression of time occurs in an act, the time referred to shall be held to be Greenwich Mean Time. Under subsection 23, the same rule applies to deeds and other instruments. During the experiment of 1968 to 1971, when the British Isles did not revert to Greenwich Mean Time during the winter, the now all-year British summer time was called British Standard Time. In Britain, UTC plus 0 is disseminated to the general public in winter and UTC plus 1 in summer. BBC radio stations broadcast the 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal. It is named from its original generation at the Royal Greenwich Observatory, and is aligned to either Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time as appropriate for the time of year. A coded radio signal is broadcast in the UK by time from NPL. As science is a precise discipline, in certain circumstances it may be advisable to use greater precision. In scientific and technical fields, the use of the term GMT has been discouraged for decades. Several countries define their local time by reference to Greenwich Mean Time. Some examples are Belgium. Decrees of 1946 and 1947 set legal time as 1 hour ahead of GMT. Ireland. Standard Time Act 1971, Section 1, and Interpretation Act 2005, Part IV, Section 18. Canada. Interpretation Act, RSC, 1985. I-21, Section 35. This refers to standard time for the several provinces, defining each in relation to Greenwich time, but does not use the expression Greenwich Mean Time. Several provinces, such as Nova Scotia, have their own legislation which specifically mentions either Greenwich Mean Time or Greenwich Mean Solar Time zone. Those countries marked in dark blue on the map above use BST, Western European Summer Time, and advanced their clock 1 hour in summer. In the United Kingdom, this is British Summer Time. In the Republic of Ireland it is called Irish Standard Time, officially changing to GMT in winter. Those countries marked in light blue keep their clocks on UTC, GMT, wet year-round. Discrepancies between legal GMT and geographical GMT. Since legal, political, social and economic criteria in addition to physical or geographical criteria are used in the drawing of time zones, actual time zones do not precisely adhere to meridian lines. The GMT time zone, were it drawn by purely geographical terms, would consist of the area between meridians 7 degrees 30 W and 7 degrees 30 E. As a result, there are European locales that, despite lying in an area with a physical UTC time, use another time zone. Conversely, there are European areas that use UTC, even though their physical time zone is UTC-1 or UTC-2, because the UTC time zone in Europe is shifted to the west. Lowest often the United Kingdom at only 1 degree 45 E is the easternmost settlement in Europe in which UTC is applied. Following is a list of the incongruencies. Countries west of 22 degrees 30 W that use UTC: the westernmost part of Iceland, including the northwest peninsula and its main town of Ísafjörður, which is west of 22 degrees 30 W, uses UTC. Bjargtanga, Iceland is the westernmost point in which UTC is applied. Countries west of 7 degrees 30 W that use UTC: Canary Islands. Most of Portugal, including Lisbon, Porto, Braga, Aveiro, and Coimbra. Since the Treaty of Windsor in 1386, Portugal has maintained close ties to Britain, which possibly explains its choice of UTC. Madeira, even further to the west, also employs UTC. A more likely explanation is that during the mid-1970s, when Portugal was on Central European time all year round, it did not begin to get light in Lisbon in winter until 8:30. Western part of Ireland, including the cities of Cork, Limerick, and Galway. Westernmost tip of Northern Ireland, including the county town of County Fermanagh, Enniskillen. Extreme westerly portion of the Outer Hebrides, west of Scotland, for instance, Battersea, an inhabited island and the westernmost settlement in Great Britain, lies at 7 degrees 54 W. Westernmost island of the Faroe Islands, Mykonos, Iceland, including Reykjavik. Northeastern part of Greenland, including Denmark, Schouen. Countries between meridians 7 degrees 30 W and 7 degrees 30 E that use UTC+1. Spain. Parts of Galicia lie west of 7 degrees 30 W, whereas there is no Spanish territory east of 7 degrees 30 E. Spain's time is the direct result of Franco's presidential order abandoning Greenwich Mean Time and advancing clocks 1 hour effective 2316 March 1940. This is an excellent example of political criteria used in the drawing of time zones. The time change was passed in consideration of the convenience from the national time marching in step according to that of other European countries. The presidential order included in its 5th article a provision for its future phase-out, which never took place. Due to this political decision, Spain is 2 hours ahead of its local mean time during the summer, 1 hour ahead in winter, which possibly explains the notoriously late schedule for which the country is known. In Portugal, which is a mere 1 hour behind Spain, the timetable is quite different. Most of France, including the cities of Paris, Marseille and Lyon, only small parts of Alsace, Lorraine and Provence are east of 7 degrees 30 E. Monaco, Andorra, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg,